Hawaii is the only state in America that used to be its own country, a real one, with kings, queens, a flag, a national anthem, foreign embassies, and treaties signed by Britain, France, Germany, and the United States itself. For nearly a century, Hawaii was officially recognized as a sovereign nation. But here's what's strange. On a single afternoon in January 1893, a small group of American businessmen walked into the Queen's palace, pointed at her with the help of a few U.S. Marines, and just like that, the kingdom was over. No war, no battle, no vote. The Queen wrote a letter of protest, went home, and waited for justice. She is still waiting. That's the kind of history Hawaii has, and this is just the beginning. For over 1,000 years, the islands had survived everything. Volcanoes tried to destroy it. European explorers tried to destroy it. Smallpox almost finished the job. Every single time, Hawaii came back. But Hawaii's greatest weakness was never its army or its size. It was something the kingdom never saw coming. Pineapples. Yes, pineapples. Let's start at the very beginning. About 1,500 years ago, the islands now called Hawaii were just empty volcanic rocks sitting in the middle of the largest ocean on Earth. Then somehow, a group of Polynesians sailing in wooden canoes navigated 2,000 miles of open Pacific using only the stars, ocean currents, and bird patterns. No maps, no compasses, just vibes and astronomy. They landed on these volcanic islands and decided, yeah, this works. Imagine being so good at sailing that you discover an entire chain of paradise islands by accident while everyone in Europe was still convinced the world was flat. For the next 1,000 years, these settlers built one of the most isolated civilizations on the planet. They developed their own language, their own gods, their own kings, and a complicated system of sacred laws called kapo. Break a kapo rule and the punishment was simple: death. Step on the king's shadow: death. Eat a banana if you were a woman: death. Touch the king's hair: definitely death. The islands were divided into dozens of small chiefdoms, each ruled by its own warrior chief, all of them constantly fighting each other for land, food, and bragging rights. This went on for centuries, until one chief from the big island decided he was done sharing. His name was Kamehameha, and he was born around 1758 on the big island of Hawaii. From the very beginning, he was different. Legend says that on the night he was born, a bright star appeared in the sky, which Hawaiian priests interpreted as a sign that this baby would one day become a killer of chiefs. The reigning king heard the prophecy and immediately ordered the baby killed, because that's what you do when a prophecy says a baby is going to murder you. The baby's parents hid him in a remote valley, where he was raised in secret by a trusted servant. So already, his life sounded like a movie. Kamehameha grew up to be enormous, even by today's standards. He stood around 66, was built like a stone wall, and could reportedly lift a 5,000-pound boulder that no other man could even budge. The rock is still there. Tourists still visit it. Nobody has moved it since. As a teenager, he became famous for one specific trick. He could catch spears thrown at him in midair and throw them right back. Witnesses described seeing him stand in front of multiple attackers and casually pluck their weapons out of the sky like he was catching baseballs. In 1779, when Kamehameha was about 20 years old, something happened that would change Hawaii forever. A British explorer named Captain James Cook sailed into Hawaiian waters. The Hawaiians had never seen Europeans before, never seen ships that big, never seen white sails, and definitely never seen guns. They thought Cook might be a god. He wasn't. Sir, the natives are bringing us pigs and fruit. Excellent. Tell them we are gods, sir. That seems like a bad idea. Nonsense. What could possibly go wrong? Cook came back a second time. Things got tense. The Hawaiians realized he was definitely not a god when he bled like everyone else, and a fight broke out on the beach. Cook was killed within minutes, but the damage was done. Hawaii was now on the world map, and European ships started showing up regularly, bringing two things that would change everything: guns and disease. Kamehameha understood the guns immediately. While other chiefs were still arguing about traditional warfare, He started trading sandalwood and food for European muskets and cannons. He even kept 2 British sailors as personal advisors, teaching him how to fire cannons properly and how European warfare worked. By 1790, Kamehameha was ready. He launched a brutal campaign to conquer every island in the chain. One by one, he invaded them, crushed their armies, and absorbed them into his growing kingdom. His most famous battle happened on the island of Oahu at a place called the Pali. He chased the defending army to the edge of a 1,000-foot cliff. The enemy's soldiers had 2 options: fight a giant with cannons or jump. Most of them jumped. To this day, hikers at the Pali Lookout occasionally still find old bones at the bottom of the cliff. By 1810, Kamehameha had done what nobody in 1,500 years had managed to do. He unified every Hawaiian island under a single ruler. He called himself King Kamehameha I, and he created an actual country, the Kingdom of Hawaii. He even designed a flag, which is genuinely one of the strangest national flags ever made. It had the British Union Jack in the corner because Kamehameha was friendly with Britain, but red, white, and blue stripes representing the 8 major islands. It looked like somebody had glued the British flag and the American flag together at a craft fair. That same flag, by the way, is still the official flag of the state of Hawaii today. Yes, really. Kamehameha was actually a pretty good king. He banned human sacrifice. He set up laws to protect ordinary people from abusive chiefs. He even passed a famous law called the Law of the Splintered Paddle, which protected travelers and the weak from violence. The story goes that, years earlier, Kamehameha had been attacked by a fisherman who broke a wooden paddle over his head. Instead of killing the fisherman, Kamehameha let him go, and later turned the incident into a law about mercy. Try to imagine any other king in history reacting that calmly to a paddle to the skull. But while Kamehameha was building his kingdom, something terrible was already happening. European ships had brought diseases the Hawaiians had no immunity to: smallpox, measles, influenza, tuberculosis, cholera. When Captain Cook first arrived, Hawaii's population was somewhere between 400,000 and 800,000 people. Within a single century, it would collapse to around 40,000. That's not a war. That's not a famine. That's an entire civilization being wiped out by germs nobody could see. Kamehameha died in 1819, and his death triggered one of the strangest moments in Hawaiian history. Within months, his son, Kamehameha II, did something nobody saw coming. He sat down at a dinner table with the women of the royal family and ate a meal with them. That doesn't sound shocking, but under the ancient Kapo laws, men and women eating together was punishable by death. The new king did it on purpose in public in front of the priests while everyone watched in horror. Then he announced that the entire Kapo system was officially over. 1,000 years of sacred religious law gone in one afternoon because the king felt like having dinner with his mom. Sir, the priests are furious. Good. They needed furious. Sir, the gods will surely punish us. Then let them. Pass the poi. Hawaii now had no religion. Just an empty spiritual hole in the middle of a kingdom. And right at that exact moment, like they had been waiting in the parking lot the whole time, American Christian missionaries arrived from Boston. The timing was almost too perfect. They stepped off the ships in 1820, looked around at a country that had just abolished its own religion, and basically said, "We have the perfect replacement for that." The Hawaiian royal family converted to Christianity within a few years. The missionaries built churches, schools, and printed the first Hawaiian language Bible. They taught Hawaiians how to read and write in their own language, which sounds nice, until you realize what was happening underneath. The missionaries also brought their children, and their children brought lawyers, and their grandchildren brought business plans. Because here is the part nobody at the time understood. Those quiet missionary families had children who would grow up in Hawaii, speak fluent Hawaiian, marry into Hawaiian society, and eventually own enormous chunks of the islands. The Doles, the Castles, the Cooks, the Baldwins, the Alexanders. Every famous missionary family name in Hawaii eventually became a famous business family name. The sons of preachers became the kings of sugar, and sugar was about to change everything. Because while Hawaii was still a kingdom on paper, with its own royal family sitting in its own palace, the real power was quietly shifting into the hands of a small group of white businessmen who controlled the plantations, the banks, the ships, and increasingly, the government. By the 1840s, Hawaii had a serious problem. The kingdom was officially recognized by Britain, France, and the United States as a sovereign nation. It had embassies. It had treaties. It even had its own postage stamps. But the population was collapsing, the economy was changing, and foreign businessmen were buying up land faster than the Hawaiians could keep track of. In 1848, under heavy pressure from foreign advisors, King Kamehameha III made a decision that would haunt Hawaii forever. He passed a law called the Great Mahel. The Mahel was supposed to modernize Hawaii by introducing private land ownership. Before this, all land technically belonged to the king, and ordinary Hawaiians lived on it under traditional arrangements. The new law divided the land into private parcels that people could buy, sell, and inherit. On paper, this sounded fair. In reality, it was a disaster. Most Hawaiian commoners didn't understand the new paperwork. They didn't know they had to file claims by specific deadlines. They didn't have lawyers. Foreigners did. Within a single generation, almost all the best land in Hawaii had quietly transferred from Hawaiian families to white plantation owners. Sir, the natives don't seem to understand the new system. Excellent. Buy their land. Sir, that feels morally questionable. Buy more of it. By the 1870s, sugar was king. Massive plantations covered the islands, growing sugar cane for export to the United States. The plantation owners needed cheap labor, so they imported tens of thousands of workers from China, Japan, Portugal, the Philippines, and Korea. Hawaii's population, which had been almost entirely native Hawaiian a century earlier, became one of the most diverse populations on Earth in just a few decades. The Hawaiians themselves were now a minority in their own kingdom. In 1874, a new king came to the throne. His name was David Kalakaua, and he was determined to push back. He became known as the Merry Monarch because he loved music, parties, and bringing back traditional Hawaiian culture. He revived the hula, which the missionaries had banned for being too sinful. He built the gorgeous Iolani Palace in Honolulu, the only royal palace ever built on American soil. He even installed electric lights in the palace before the White House had them. Yes, really. Hawaii's royal palace had electricity before the President of the United States did. Let that sit for a moment. Kalakaua also did something nobody expected. In 1881, he became the first monarch of any country to travel around the entire world. He met Emperor Meiji in Japan, the Pope in Rome, Queen Victoria in Britain, and President Chester Arthur in Washington. He was trying to do something very specific. He was trying to make alliances that would protect Hawaii from being swallowed by the United States. He even tried to arrange a royal marriage between his niece and a Japanese prince, hoping to bring Japan into a protective alliance. Japan politely declined. They could see what was coming, and they did not want to be in the middle of it. Because back home in Hawaii, the sugar barons were getting restless. They wanted lower tariffs on their sugar exports to America, which meant they needed Hawaii to be closer to the United States, not further from it. They saw Kalakaua's foreign trips as a threat. So in 1887, they made their move. A small group of white businessmen and lawyers, calling themselves the Hawaiian League, organized an armed militia. They marched on the palace, surrounded the king, and forced him at gunpoint to sign a brand new constitution. This document became known as the Bayonet Constitution because it was literally signed at the point of a bayonet. The new constitution stripped the king of most of his power, gave it to a legislature controlled by white plantation owners, and changed the voting laws so that most native Hawaiians could no longer vote in their own country. To vote, you now had to own significant property or earn a high income, which conveniently excluded most Hawaiians and conveniently included most foreigners. Sir, we just forced the king to sign away his own power. Excellent. Did anyone die? Not yet, sir. Well, the day is young. Kalakaua was now a king in name only. He spent his last years a broken man, watching foreigners run his country while he held an empty crown. In 1891, he traveled to San Francisco for his health and died there of kidney disease. His final recorded words were, "Tell my people I tried." His sister, Liliuokalani, became the new queen. She was 52 years old, sharp, well-educated, deeply religious, and absolutely furious about what had happened to her brother. She had one goal: take Hawaii back. Queen Liliuokalani was unlike any Hawaiian ruler before her. She had been educated by the missionaries themselves, spoke fluent English, played multiple musical instruments, and had even composed the song Aloha O, which is still one of the most famous Hawaiian songs in the world. She had visited Queen Victoria. She had toured Europe. She knew exactly how the white plantation owners thought because she had grown up around them. And she was not afraid of them. Almost immediately after taking the throne in 1891, she announced her plan. She would write a brand new constitution that would restore the power of the monarchy and give voting rights back to native Hawaiians. The Bayonet Constitution would be torn up. Hawaii would be Hawaiian again. The sugar barons heard about her plan and immediately panicked. If the Queen succeeded, they would lose control of the legislature, lose their grip on the economy, and possibly lose their plantations entirely. They couldn't let that happen. So a small group of 13 men, mostly American and European businessmen, formed a secret organization called the Committee of Safety. The name was a joke. There was nothing safe about what they were planning. They were planning a coup. On January 16, 1893, the Committee of Safety made their move. They sent a message to John L. Stevens, the American ambassador to Hawaii, claiming that American lives and property were in danger. This was a lie. Nothing was happening. The streets of Honolulu were quiet. But Stevens, who was already secretly working with the plotters, ordered 162 United States Marines to march off the USS Boston, which was conveniently sitting in Honolulu Harbor, and take up positions around the city. "Sir, why are American Marines marching through our capital?" "To protect American citizens, ma'am. From what? From whatever happens next." The Marines did not fire a single shot. They didn't have to. Their presence was the entire point. They positioned themselves directly across the street from Iolani Palace with their rifles visible, sending a very clear message. If the Queen tried to resist, the United States military would respond. The next afternoon, January 17, 1893, the Committee of Safety walked into a government building, read a short proclamation declaring the monarchy abolished, and announced a new provisional government. That was it. That was the entire coup. A piece of paper and 162 Marines. Queen Liliuokalani had to make a decision, and she had to make it fast. She could order her royal guard to fight. They were loyal. They were armed. They would have died for her. But she also knew exactly what would happen next. The American Marines would open fire. Hawaiians would be slaughtered in the streets. Her capital would burn. And in the end, the result would be the same. So she did something extraordinary. She surrendered, but she did it with a trick. She wrote a formal letter of protest, addressed not to the men who had overthrown her, but to the United States government itself. In the letter, she stated very clearly that she was yielding her authority not to the Committee of Safety, but to the superior military force of the United States of America. She was saying on the record that this was not a Hawaiian revolution. This was an American invasion, and she trusted that once the American government heard the truth, they would undo what had been done and restore her throne. It was a brilliant legal move, and for a brief moment it actually worked. The new provisional government immediately sent representatives to Washington to ask the United States to annex Hawaii. They expected a quick yes, but then something unexpected happened. A new American president took office. His name was Grover Cleveland, and he was not interested in rewarding what looked very much like an illegal coup. He pulled the annexation treaty from the Senate and ordered a full investigation. The investigator, James Blount, traveled to Hawaii, interviewed everyone involved, and came back with a damning report. He concluded that the Queen had been overthrown illegally, that the American ambassador had conspired with the plotters, and that the United States Marines had been used improperly to support a coup against a friendly nation. President Cleveland read the report and was horrified. He gave a speech to Congress calling the whole affair an act of war committed against a peaceful country by American officials acting without authority. He demanded that the Queen be restored to her throne. And here is where it gets unbelievable. The provisional government in Hawaii simply said no. They refused. The President of the United States ordered them to give the country back, and a small group of plantation owners in Honolulu told him to go away. Cleveland was furious, but he had a problem. He couldn't send the military to remove the very government that American Marines had just helped install. The political backlash in the United States would have been catastrophic, so he did the only thing he could do: nothing. He left the situation frozen, hoping a future president would have the courage to fix it. None of them did. In 1894, the plotters dropped the pretense of being a temporary government and declared themselves the Republic of Hawaii. The president of this new republic was a man named Sanford Dole. Yes, that Dole. The same family that would later put their name on every pineapple can in your grocery store. The Dole family had started as missionaries, became lawyers, became plantation owners, and now they were running the country. Queen Liliuokalani refused to recognize the republic. She continued to call herself the Queen, and most native Hawaiians continued to call her the Queen. In January 1895, a group of Hawaiian loyalists, mostly young men, attempted an armed uprising to restore her throne. It failed within days. The Republic immediately arrested the Queen, claiming she had known about the plot. They threw her into a single small room on the second floor of her own palace and kept her there for 8 months. "Sir, the Queen is asking for a piano." "Give her a piano. What is she going to do? Escape with it?" "Sir, she is writing songs about us. Bad songs. Very bad songs, sir." While locked in her own palace, Liliuokalani composed over 100 songs. She also embroidered an enormous quilt that survives to this day, every stitch carrying her grief. She was eventually forced to sign a document formally abdicating her throne in exchange for the lives of the loyalists who had fought for her. They were going to be executed. She signed. She always insisted afterward that the signature meant nothing because it had been obtained under duress. The Republic did not care. Then came 1898, and the timing could not have been more cynical. The United States went to war with Spain, and suddenly Hawaii looked very useful. It was the perfect place to refuel American warships heading to the Philippines. President William McKinley, unlike Cleveland, had no problem with annexation. Congress passed a joint resolution. McKinley signed it, and on August 12, 1898, the Hawaiian flag was lowered at Iolani Palace. The American flag went up in its place. There was no treaty. There was no vote of the Hawaiian people. There was just a piece of paper passed in Washington and a flag swapped on a hot August afternoon. Thousands of native Hawaiians stayed home that day in protest. The Royal Hawaiian Band, which had been ordered to play at the ceremony, refused to perform. The musicians walked off rather than play music while their country was erased. They held a counter-gathering at a hotel down the street and sang Aloha O, the Queen's song, instead. Queen Liliuokalani lived another 19 years. She traveled to Washington several times, trying to get her kingdom back through legal channels. She wrote a book called Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's Queen, laying out the entire scandal in careful detail. She kept writing letters, kept filing claims, kept reminding everyone who would listen that her country had been stolen. Nobody in power ever returned it. She died in 1917, in her own home in Honolulu, no longer a queen of anything, surrounded by the country that had once been hers. In 1959, Hawaii officially became the 50th state of the United States. Most Americans today have no idea any of this ever happened. They picture Hawaii as a tropical vacation spot with beaches and luau's, not as a kingdom that was overthrown by a small group of businessmen and a handful of Marines on a quiet afternoon. But here is the part that almost nobody knows. In 1993, exactly 100 years after the coup, the United States Congress passed something called the Apology Resolution. President Bill Clinton signed it. The document formally apologized to the native Hawaiian people for the illegal overthrow of their kingdom. It admitted in writing that the Queen had never given up her sovereignty, that the coup had been carried out with the help of American military forces, and that the Hawaiian people had never voted to give up their country. The apology was real. The land was not returned, and that is Hawaii. A kingdom that survived volcanoes, plagues, and 1,000 years of isolation, only to be undone in a single afternoon by a few men with a piece of paper. If you want to understand America's hidden history, you cannot skip this story. Click here. The next one is even wilder, and I'll catch you next time.